Hello and welcome to episode 131 of the Mouses Makes Knitting podcast. Are you proud of me? I didn't have to look again. Right. I've got some odds and ends to show you this week. Again, I seem to have done a lot of knitting but have nothing much to show for it. But you'll see that in a bit. First things first, the topping out mail has finished. Winners have been picked. You will need to watch Belinda's Baubles to see if you have won, assuming you've entered. There is a link down below to her podcast. I know who've won the prizes that I'm donating, and I just need those people to get in touch with me. Belinda will tell you how. Instagram or email is the best. So either amanda.davies58 on Instagram or mousesmakes@gmail.com. Don't forget the S in the middle. Everyone forgets the S in the middle and then I don't get it. It's not mouse makes, mouses makes. Right. Where to start? Shall I start with the traditional bit, the finished object? I finished a pair of socks for Peter. This is the second pair of, well, what he thinks is 3. He came to me end of January, beginning of February, and chose some yarn for some socks. This is the second pair. He chose 3 yarns. I've started the third pair. I'll show you those in a minute. But what he doesn't know is that there were 4 yarns that he liked. But he said, oh, I won't pick 4. That'll be greedy. Well, I'm going to make him the 4th pair as well. So this is looks frantically around, hoping that she's saved. It's an opal. Opal. Fresh Freunds. I have no idea what that means. I think it means class reunion. Is that the one that means? No. I don't know. It doesn't matter. I've shown it to you before. For the main body of the sock, the heel and the toes are in my own hand dyed in a one-of-a-kind skein that I dyed up originally to go into the Aurora cabin shawl. That got pulled down, so they went into the Geo Gradient last year, which was the mystery knit along Stephen West, and there was just a little bit left, so I've done heels and toes in those, and they go surprisingly well with this opal yarn, I think. The socks don't match, which you can probably see. Let me do them like so. Now the first pair I knit, I'm going to put a picture in here. They didn't match because I'd gone from the bottom of the ball, no, the inside and the outside of the ball, so I could knit them concurrently. So for this pair, I separated it into 2 balls and still didn't bother to match it. So he's had 2 pairs so far that don't match. The next pair I'm going to show you are going to match. It's my own sock recipe, 64 stitches. I did 15 rounds for the cuff, 60 rounds for the leg. I don't usually do it in rounds, but I can't remember what they were in centimetres because I'm having to rewrite it because I still can't find my sock recipe notebook. This pair have got a heel flap and gusset. The first pair had an afterthought heel, and then I did 80 rounds for the leg. No, this is the foot. I did 80 rounds for the foot, and then 6 rows plain, and then the toe with the contrast yarn. If I'm putting in a heel flap and gusset, it looks like I need 80 rows. If I'm using an afterthought heel, I needed 71, because obviously there's not as much of the contrast as there would be. An afterthought heel would end sort of here. Size 9, UK size 9, yeah. So that's the new sock recipe for Dave and Peter. They have the same size feet. So I will show you the picture of Peter's socks that I finished, the first pair, not these. I think an afterthought heel, which fits Dave beautifully, is a little snug on Peter. I'm going to put a picture in. I will zero in on where I feel the stitches are a bit stretched. So I might do a heel flap and gusset on the next pair. I know it messes with the striping, but I think it might fit him better. So that's pair number 2. Over here is pair number 3. And again, I'm knitting them at the same time. I haven't got very far. I only started them yesterday. Let me see. I can't do 2 at once. It's too hard. Holding them up, I mean. Right, so I've got this much on both socks. And they do, if you can see, match perfectly. Because this time I wasn't lazy. I had to wind quite a lot off. I feel like I haven't podcasted for ages and it's only been a week, but I'm juggling stuff and I'm just all out of kilter. I had to wind that much off to get the pattern to match. That does not matter. I have got plenty still, and if I need to, I can always add it in at the end. The yarn is Cascade Yarns Heritage Prints, and the colourway is number 69, so it's going to look like that. And I've started both socks just after that burgundy stripe at the top. So it's gone from the next green one. I don't think they make this colourway anymore. I've had this for 2 or 3 years. And it was originally bought to make some socks for Peter, and then he seemed to go off socks, so I didn't. I just kept it in stash. And then he chose it himself, so I'm quite glad that I have thought of it. I have looked since, only on Wool Warehouse, in all fairness, but they didn't have this colourway anymore. So I don't know if it's probably been discontinued. Excuse me. I may have to get a drink of water in a minute. And I'm going to use this for heels and toes, which I think goes quite nicely. And that's the Drops Fable in 113, again out of stash. So I'm getting some yarns out of stash by apparently being very kind and motherly and knitting socks. I've also been asked, and this is not something that I normally do, I've also been asked if I can knit some bed socks as a surprise for Dave's friend's wife. I was reluctant. It's not something that I normally do. If you knit socks, you will understand there's a lot of work goes into a pair of socks. It's a chunk of time that I could be knitting on all the other 30 other things, and I'm not exaggerating, there are 30 other things that I have to knit. But there was a bit of a sob story went along with it, and so I agreed. And I agreed to knit 6 pairs. I know what you're all saying. You're saying exactly the same thing that I say to anyone who says to me, oh, I'm going to knit this thing that I didn't really want to knit. No is a complete sentence. Just say no. I'm from the Grange Hill era. Just say no. And I'm the worst person in the world for taking my own advice, apparently. So, it's all been very tricky because it's a surprise. That's the wrong bag. And so, clandestine operations have been in progress. They don't live in this country. So, what I've had to do is get Dave's friend to borrow one of his wife's current bed socks and send me photographs with a tape measure with measurements and hope that it fits. So I'm knitting a sock to those measurements, and I've already had a bit of an accident with it. Actually, let me borrow this. I'm doing these in DK. On a group, Facebook group that I belong to, someone had posted some DK socks that they'd made with the Tin Can Knits pattern. The Rye socks, not Rye Light, that's the fingering weight, just Rye. And I've got the Tin Can Knits app. Gosh, that's hard to say. And so I thought, I'll do that. They'd make really good bed socks because they've got a stocking stitch heel flap. Great idea. If you're familiar with the pattern, you might have already spotted my little mistake. I started off knitting them on DPNs. I'm knitting a women's large. The lady in question has size 9 feet. And I'm knitting it according to the measurements that I've been given. So I needed to do a large. And DK on DPNs, it's lots of letters. Apparently, it's too tricky for me. If you've been around a while, you might remember that I have problems with DPNs. I have to always use the 20 centimetre. Even if I'm doing something with a very small circumference, because I cannot stand them scraping on my palms. I have super sensitive hands and sensory issues anyway, and it's just torture. So I started off with DPNs and it was not good. It was very much not good. So I ended up with some of the stitches on a DPN and the rest magic loop on this cable, which I don't know if you can tell, it's not ideal for sock knitting. It's very firm. These are some of the cheap Chinese circular needles that I use a lot, but they're not great for sock knitting because there's just not enough flexibility in the cable, which is great for larger garments, but a bit of a disadvantage when you need to magic loop. So I had half the stitches on 2 DPNs, one and then one to knit with, and the other half on the cable while I did the heel. Great. Got past the heel, got past all the decreases for the gusset, and now I can manage with it on this cable and eliminate the DPNs. But first of all, I picked up the wrong green. Now it's very dark in here today, so I don't know how well this is coming out, but I don't feel that this green, let me move that out of the way, which is a Drops Fable, goes terribly well with the green in this yarn, which is my Mousewitch Lemon and Lime colourway. I think this is too yellowy, but I'm not pulling it down and doing it again. I've since realised that I could probably have got away without putting in a contrast heel, because I'm using a 400-gram skein and holding it double. Whereas when I knit DK socks before, I used a DK weight yarn, which of course has less meterage, and I barely had enough to make a sock with a leg this long. And I began to panic because I was making 2 sizes smaller for myself. But of course there's more meterage on this. So I have got essentially 200 meters for each sock. Whereas with the DK, I only had just over 100 meters for each sock. I don't think I needed to put a contrast heel in. So I'm not going to put a contrast toe in. But of course I've got to do the other sock to match. And then I'll see how much I've got left over. And if I make another DK pair, I'll know whether or not I need that contrast colour. But none of that has anything to do with the mistake. Well, actually some of it does. Because I was struggling so much with the DPNs and my hands, that this panel on the front, if you're familiar with the pattern, should be garter stitch, and it's not. It's reverse stocking stitch. Because I did do a Mandy and I didn't read the pattern. I went, oh yeah, I know what I'm doing. But also, so much of my brain space was taken up by trying to use the DPNs like this so that my hands didn't touch the points, that I don't know, I went on autopilot and did reverse stocking stitch, and I knew as soon as I picked them up this morning, I went, I've done that wrong. And then I looked at the pattern and I saw that I had in fact done it wrong. But I could tell just by looking at it, because if you know how to read your knitting, if you look at the picture, you can see it's garter stitch on this panel, not reverse stocking stitch. Ow. But now, of course, I've got to do the other one the same. So, never mind. So long as it fits, that's all that really matters, isn't it? So yes, this is the first pair. And it's kind of a test pair to see if all the measurements and what have you work. Annoying, but there you go. That's what happens when you don't read a pattern properly. And I can't even blame the reading of the pattern. It was more to do with the fact that I was struggling so much with the DPNs. I should have just waited. I have ordered another needle. I should have just waited for that to come, but I wanted to get started, and so yeah. So that was that. This is like my guilty pleasure knitting. It's my mitered square blanket, and I'm going to show it to you quickly. Although you've seen it several times now, but it's got quite a few more squares in it. And what I'm doing, reminded by my friend Caroline from the Area Bark podcast, that I was in fact making a list of the yarns that I knew. I don't know all of them, but some of them I do. And so the ones that I know, I'm writing down in a list. I've taken it a step further. Wait till you see this. Where are we? So, my list so far goes up to 91 squares. I haven't done 91 squares, but I'm going to try and show you. I've got, what did I work out? 18, yes, 18 wide, and then I'm going to see how tall I get. So I don't know if you can see this, but these obviously are the ones that I've done, and I've coloured them. Oh look, that's what I was looking for. I'll tell you about that in a minute. I've coloured them in with a vaguely corresponding colour. So these two, which obviously are two very different colours, they're just marked as red. This is marked as orange. That's blue. That's blue. That's blue. It's, you know, it's vague. But all the squares are numbered. And then on this page, so far I've got 2 pages, 3 pages even, with very little filled in. Some of that is because I've not done those squares yet, because as you can see, the way the numbers run, I've done along to number 6 and up to number 91, but obviously I haven't filled in any of these yet. So that's the reason for some of the gaps. Some of the other gaps are because I don't know what the yarn is. So if I don't know what it is, I'm just putting in a question mark. Where can I show you? Oh yeah. So there. The yarns that I don't know, I've put a question mark so that I do at least know that that square's been filled in. Do you remember last week I was showing you my triangulum and I looked everywhere? I said, I know I've written it down. I looked everywhere for where I'd made a note. I've done a triangle a day up until the last one was the 5th of August. So yeah, it just fell out of there. I don't know where I'd had it stashed, but I found it. So at least I know I can carry on marking that off when I go back to it. At the moment it is in hibernation because there's too much other stuff and I just can't be doing with it at the moment. If I can't find this again, it's in the front of my knitting scrapbook. So next time I get the triangulum out and I'm going, I know I had a list somewhere of what dates I'd got up to. Can somebody put in the comments, it's in the grey scrapbook. So yeah, this is my guilty pleasure knitting. Each square takes me about an hour, I suppose. Because, oh no, there's somebody at the door. I'm knitting it mindfully. I think that's the Amazon man at the front door. So he's just going to leave it on the step or put it through the thing. What's the thing called? Letterbox. But Ewan's in the shower and I'm doing this, so that'll be the other needle. Anyway, yes, I'm knitting these squares mindfully. This is my Zen knitting. So I'm just doing it when I want to relax. I have started the big one. This is the Birthstone collection blanket and I have put in this many rows of the diamond April birthstone. Can you even see that? It's so dark. And I'm using it double. And somebody asked me last week how many grams I was using for each square. And I gave them an estimate of around 75-80. I'm actually going to weigh this for you. So I should be able to let you know next week exactly how much each square takes. But yeah, I haven't got very much done. It's been a busy weekend. On the subject of the weekend, it's been Easter weekend here in the UK. So it's been a double bank holiday. Friday, Saturday, Sunday and then Monday. I'm hoping everybody has enjoyed their Easter. If you celebrate, I'm hoping you've enjoyed your long weekend, if indeed you got to have one. I know not all countries do, and not everyone in this country has a chance to have a long weekend because doctors and nurses are still working, supermarket staff are still working, Petrol station staff are still working. You know, there's lots of people who don't get a chance to enjoy the long weekend. We had a relatively good weekend. The weather could have been better. Dave was actually off for most of last week, which I think I told you. He had to go into work on Wednesday. Thursday, we went over to Cheddar in Somerset, home of the famous Cheddar Gorge, also home to a big leather place. And we went there. Dave wanted to buy some leather, and I actually fell in love with a piece of leather and bought it for him to make stuff solely for me. So he's working on a new project bag for me, sort of a cylindrical bucket bag style one. I'm very excited about that. Yeah, but we did that on Thursday. If you follow me on Instagram, you may have seen some photographs. The journey up there was absolutely horrendous. You couldn't see past the bonnet on the motorway, although the photograph that I took didn't show that. It just looks like it's a bit wet, but it was horrendous. The spray, and people were going at far too high a speed. And then we got there and the sun came out. Just before we got there, there was the most beautiful rainbow, and then it became a double rainbow. And I took photographs of all of that, which didn't come out very well at all. So I'm sorry about that. And then the drive home was glorious sunshine. But obviously we were driving into the sun, so couldn't enjoy it too much because we were like this. We were going to have lunch. This is the life section. If you want to skip through this to see what other woolly stuff's coming, then don't sit around to listen to what you don't want to hear. We were going to have a nice lunch out, and of course with the traffic and the weather and everything, and we were longer at the place than we intended to be. It was 3 o'clock by the time we were looking for something for lunch. And Dave had intended to go to a pub that we'd been to before when we stayed in Cheddar for our first wedding anniversary. Many, many, many years ago, when we were still living in London. And so we found the pub, and I said, I bet they're not serving food, it's too late. And I didn't want to get out the car and walk to the pub and get back in the car if they weren't. So Dave said, I'll go and have a look. And he went and he had a look. He went, yeah, there's loads of people in there eating. So in we went, and we fought our way through a group of about 20 people who'd obviously been walking, like hiking, and were absolutely dripping wet. Their waterproofs were sort of spread all over the place. Wooden floors. It was like an ice rink. There were 3 or 4, I couldn't count them because they were all darting about. Little dogs, sort of Jack Russell sized dogs, absolutely soaking wet. The floor was so wet and so slippery. So we fought our way through all of that, found a table. Dave went to the bar to ask for a menu. Kitchen's closed. So then it turned out that he'd actually just looked through a window and seen somebody eating a nice sandwich and some chips. So we left the pub again, and we ended up on the way home having KFC. Other fast food restaurants are available. And really, by that point, it was about 4 o'clock. I'd had nothing to eat since breakfast, and I wouldn't have cared what it was. But it was actually very nice. Then we came home. Ewan was working. That was that, really. Oh, it was my Zoom in the evening, the members Zoom. Friday. What did we do Friday? Dave did stuff around the house Friday, I think. Saturday was the best day of the whole weekend. Glorious sunshine. And Dave went out on the bike for the day. He went to see his friend. Turned out his friend was in America, which was a bit far for him to go on the bike. So he ended up down at West Bay, which is a famous bikers meeting place. and have fish and chips without me. And then he went along the coast to Seaton, where he stopped to have a nice ice cream, again without me. But he was mugged for his ice cream by a seagull, so I kind of feel like retribution has been served. I am a little salty, I think they say today, about the fact that he went out for the day on the bike without me. But in all honesty, I couldn't have managed it. I couldn't have got on the bike. It's very tall. For those of you that are familiar with bikes, it's a Triumph Tiger. It is very tall. We genuinely, before I got so ill and I didn't really have the strength and wasn't allowed out for like a decade, it felt like, we genuinely were trying to think of some way we could make a little step, a little folding step that I could lower down to get off and use to get on, and then haul it back up and tuck it between us. Seriously, it's very tall and I am not. So yeah, I couldn't have managed it, and he deserved a nice day out. It's a shame he had to do it by himself, but yeah. So yeah, and then Sunday we went out for a meal. I did post a picture of that. I might put one in here actually. Lauren couldn't join us. She wasn't very well, but we took her home. They did us a meal exactly the same as we'd had, but they put it in containers and we took it home for her. Ewan refused to be in the photograph, so he took the photograph. It's a very unflattering picture of me because I'm leaning over like this, trying to get in it. And then the rest of Sunday was a very chilled day. Dave and I came home, stretched out on the sofa and watched a couple of films and had a sandwich for tea, and that was about it. Monday. Can't really remember Monday. That's sad, isn't it? It was only yesterday. What happened yesterday? Oh, I did some admin-y bits, and Dave did, well, his plan had been to spend the whole day in the garden, but around mid-morning the heavens opened and that put paid to that for a couple of hours until the sun came back out and dried it off a bit. So he did do a little bit in the garden. And then again we sat around and watched films and series that we were enjoying. So we just had really a very relaxed weekend, which was nice. It was necessary, I think. Poppy is no better. If anything, she's a little bit worse. It seems to be with her at the moment, we take one step forward and then 2 steps back again. So I don't really know where we are with that. Oh, and I told you this last week, I know. But for anybody who didn't see last week, I'm going to the Sudbury Yarn Over on Sunday. If you see me there, please feel free to come and say hello. As I always say, approach cautiously, I startle easily, and I am very shy. So if all I do is manage to say, oh, hello, hello, oh, that's nice. That's because my brain has gone into fight or flight mode, and yeah, I probably won't remember your name, so don't be offended. I'll try and write it down. I met 2 lovely ladies last September at the Southern Wool Show. Could not remember their names. It's not me being rude. I promise you it's not me being rude. When I was younger, my mum used to say, oh, you're so rude. You're so rude to people. I don't think, well, there wasn't such a thing back then. I know. We didn't realise that I was slightly neurodivergent back then. And so in social situations, I would just shut down. I've learned over the years to deal with them much better than that. Like 100 times better than that. But yeah, there is still an element of fear when approached by strangers. So think of me as like a very nervous horse and we'll be okay. Right, have I got anything else? to tell you, nonsense wise. No. Right, I'm just going to very quickly, because I've rabbited on for much longer than I intended to. These are not crocheted up yet. I'd like to say they would have been if it weren't for socks, but I think that might be a lie. My crocheted square blanket. You may remember I'm doing 10 squares a month, 5 Mousewitch Yarn monthly mystery mini club, and 5 Yarn Unique monthly mystery mini clubs. This is the inspiration picture for Yarn Unique this month. It's called Rosette. Yarn Uniques is themed on Journey Through Space. This is actually February, but I receive it in March. So this month I'll receive March's, even though it will be April. Is that clear? This is the Rosette Galaxy. It is inspired by the Rosette Nebula. Beg your pardon, it's a nebula, not a galaxy. A fitting theme for February. Located 3,000 light years away, the nebula is rich in hydrogen made by the large number of new stars, new being relative, probably means they're billions of years old, which causes the unique and beautiful red glow emitted. So that was the inspiration photo. And if I can get them all together, these are the yarns. Very pretty, very, very pretty. As usual, there are a couple that I go, oh, I would have had a sweater's quantity in that. It's the same every month. So those are the Yarn Unique ones for February, but I'm calling it March. And then the Mousewitch Yarns, whoop, little balls rolling everywhere. Inspiration for March was this photo. And so the colours were these. So it's kind of a deconstructed kingfisher, if you like. I know they say that a lot on food type programs. Oh, it's deconstructed pavlova. This is a deconstructed kingfisher. But I can't seem to have enough hand to show you the picture. And can I do it like that? All right, if I put that one there. I'm going to waste a lot of time now trying to get all the... Right, okay. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Can we do it like this? Aha. There we go. You'll have to zoom in a bit. So obviously this one is the background, and when you see it in real life, it's kind of a, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm doing this. Do you understand what this means? I hope so. Light to dark through the skein. I can't think what the right word is, but yeah. So that's the deconstructed kingfisher, and this colour is this bit right up on his head. That was March. I need to get them crocheted up because I already have April's Mousewitch Yarn April one, and I suspect the Yarn Unique March one, which comes in April, will not be far behind it. So I need to get going because I'm falling behind. I have worked out, somebody suggested this, that rather than get Advents this year, I crochet my squares together, because that's the plan, is to join as you go them in a blanket. And I'm going to do that as well, obviously. And I've worked out that if I come December, if I join together 5 squares a day, by Christmas Day the blanket will be done apart from a border if I decide I want to put a border on it, which I can then do between Christmas and New Year, and it will be done by the end of the year, which is sort of what I'd planned originally, but I'd planned to do 10 squares a month. So the Mousewitch yarns and the Yarn Unique, and then I'd been going to put Mousewitch above Yarn Unique above Mousewitch. And then my friend Nancy, I've told you this before, my friend Nancy, who has the Kitty Scrapper podcast and knows me well enough to know that I have some peculiarities about certain colours being together, said, what's going to happen if you've got colours adjacent to each other that you don't want to be adjacent to each other? And so I've changed my plan, and we are going with plan B. And so it will still be finished by the end of December, which was the original plan, but I'm just doing it a slightly different way. Okay. Also, my other plan didn't, well, I suppose it did. I was going to say my original plan didn't allow for blocking the squares, but it did really. Yeah. But I'm happy with what I'm doing now, so that's okay. Right, I think that is everything. I have worked a little on my star blanket, but again, each row is taking just over half an hour, and although I've worked on it for about 4 hours, there's nothing much to show you. So I'll show you that next week. There should be some more progress. I'm keeping that. That's my while I'm watching the television, mostly. Though I have now been knitting socks as well. I would like to get that finished within the next 2 weeks. It's achievable, but only if I actually knit it. If I just keep knitting things while it sits next to me, that's not going to work. So I have to actually pick it up and make the stitches. That, I think, really is everything I had to tell you. So I don't know what I'm going to do. I had planned to vlog the yarn show at the weekend, but I've downloaded the booklet, and it says to speak to the stall holders before you take any photographs. So I don't know how I would stand videoing unless I literally ask everybody's permission before I'd have to go in and ask everybody's permission and then come back in and video. So I don't know that that's going to work. So I might just take some pictures and show you next week. I'd hope to do a whole vlog for you, but yeah, I don't think that's going to work. So I'm now going to go and clear up the mess that I've made again. It's not as bad as last week. Last week was a disaster. This week I've just got to put some things back in bags and put them away. That's not too bad. So I'm going to do that, and I will see you next week. I might see some of you on Sunday. That would be good. And until then, happy knitting. Hope the weather is kind. We're now into British summertime. Somebody needs to tell the weather that. And I will see you next week. Bye, guys.